Welcome to a project of the All Ohio 99s. We are recording Living History, the biographies of our members, and I am joined tonight by Lisa Blair and Kay Johnson as we interviewed Kay about her flying adventures. Lisa has a list of questions for Kay, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
I'm excited to be here today to talk to Kay and find out about all of her flying adventures. So first off, Kay, when did you start your private pilot training?
It was in 1976. I was in my early 40s, and my son had gone off to college, and I was terrible at trying to play bridge, so I took up flying.
I like it. So was that what inspired you to become a pilot, or was there something else?
No, it was because my son soloed. Well, from the time he was born, he was eyes were in the sky, and he soloed at 16 and got his license on his 16th birthday and got his license on the 17th birthday. And we were able to get an airplane. The flight school that he was taking his lessons from went bankrupt, and we had kicked around the idea of getting an airplane, and they offered this instrument trainer, which was a Cherokee 180, for the cost that they owed the bank. We called our bookkeeper, accountant, I should say, and he says, go ahead and do it. And so we did. So we had an airplane available, and of course I went up with him, and as long as with his dad, and I just fell in love with it. Well, he went off to college, and my husband had gotten his pilot's license, and but he had really no interest in. To make a long story short, Bruce said, Mom, if you want to fly, start to take lessons, because the navigational part was easier for me. So anyway, I did, and so that's where I got started. And it took me, well, of course, I started in the summer, and I got my private's license in June. So, but once I soloed, you know, I had an airplane available, and I flew and flew and flew, and of course, build up hours and confidence and so forth. So, anyway, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but
You're doing great.
okay.
So
Is that the plane that you had up until a few years ago, Kay?
Yeah, and
Wow.
my son still has it.
That's amazing, all
Yeah.
those years.
And he has completely redone it, but that's neither here nor there.
All right.
all right. So how would you describe how you felt after your first solo?
I was elated because that was what was holding me back more than anything. And I just couldn't seem to flare right. And my instructor, which his name was Jim McGinnis, he said, well, just going to have to develop some muscles in order to bring that yoke back at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it was not strictly legal, Bruce, of course, was not an instructor at that time. And he got in the airplane with me, and he says, okay, Mom, let's see what's going on. And he's, so consequently I showed him what was wrong. And he says, it's simple, Mom, just trim it up,
Right.
it up. And once I did that, it just, everything fell in place. And so anyway, I soloed, and you couldn't stop me. I was gone all the time.
I love it. So then how did you feel after your first solo cross country and then your check ride?
Oh, that was thrilling, that long cross country. I remember that um, I worked and worked and worked on it. And well, no, I only had to do it once. I didn't have to do it more. But I can remember coming back. I was so thrilled because I knew that once I had that down, it was close to the check ride. And I remember that evening we had to go to a party. And so I told my husband, I said, I'm so tired. I went out in the car while the rest of the party was going on, and I was just exhausted, but it was all going in my head. You know what I mean? All
Yeah.
this so forth, and the stops that I made, and the guys who signed my log book, on each stop. And I can't remember. I know one was in, oh shoot, I think it was Bell Fountain and the old strip up there, and then someplace in Indiana, um, Wabash, around the Wabash River, someplace. Anyway, um, well, that's the tale of my long cross country. And you wanted to know about the check ride?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I took my instruction at OSU, and oh shoot, I'm trying to think of his name. Isn't that awful? It's just, but anyway, he was the designee up at OSU, and he was the one who assigned Jim McGinnis to me. And well, he was the head of the aviation. And I'll think of his name in a little bit because I'm trying to, get all this stuff. It's kind of muddled up in my mind. Um, but anyway, I can remember that it was kind of a blustery day. And I know we had a crosswind at Bolton Field, but OSU had all runways for every direction. And you know what? I did a good job. He said, you did just fine. So anyway, I passed that, and oh, I just felt like, $1 million, especially at my age, when up to that time, the only decisions I had to make was whether to use a fourth teaspoon or a half teaspoon in a recipe. So anyway, I was pretty elated.
That's awesome. So besides solo and check ride, name a memorable part of your flight training experience.
Um, well, I think one of the things was getting weather. We didn't have all this technology at that time. And of course, naturally, on every flight, I was told to, find the weather. And at that time, Columbus had, what do you call them? Flight services.
Right.
And those guys were kind of arrogant. When you called um, to get weather, unless it was for an IFR, they just said, I don't think you should go, so forth. So, but anyway, that really was the only block that I had in my flight training. I don't remember of anything that caused any concern for me.
Okay. And how has earning your private pilot certificate changed your life?
Well, like you said, up until that time, I was just a regular housewife. Well, of course, a business person along with my husband and everything. And but I joined the 99s. It was a whole new scope of sisterhood, and I got so much inspiration from those who were my well, seniors as far as flight is experience. And at that time, all Ohio we would have sometimes 44 or 45 people at our meetings. And when you consider in those days, of course, one thing was aviation fuel was very cheap. I remember that it was below $1 a gallon. And so consequently, you know, those people who had airplanes, and a lot of them did, you know, we were just able to go. So I'm not sure that that answers your question, but
It's fine. That's perfectly fine. So, what ratings have you earned?
well, just the private pilot and the instrument. That's all. I had no desire to get a commercial rating because I knew that all my flying was going to be just for fun.
Okay, perfect. And then, what aircraft have you had the opportunity to fly? What kinds or what ones?
Well, my own airplane, of course, and the only other airplane that I ever flew was Linda Blodgett's, and of course, she had a Cherokee too. So
Okay.
no, well, there were no. I would have to rent an airplane in order to be able to fly a Cessna or any other airplane. So I was perfectly content. I had no desire to really branch out and fly a lot of aircraft.
Okay. Do you have a favorite aircraft besides the one you've flown?
Well, there would be one that I would like to have, and I even during the time that I was flying, I would have loved to have had an Arrow, which is a complex airplane. I would have loved to be able to pull up the gear, and have more speed, ground speed and airspeed and everything. But other than that, no, not really.
Okay.
I was perfectly content with she was such a good airplane. She never, ever, ever let me down. And, I honestly thought she had a soul. That's kind of silly, but, she was just part of me. Because I had over 3,000 hours in her. Think
Well,
about that.
that's wonderful.
That's awesome.
That is so amazing to be able to have that freedom to be able to have
Yeah.
a plane and go where you want to go.
Well,
And you did a lot of stuff.
we did, and my husband was so supportive. He never complained about the money that I spent, and if I wanted to go off out west with Linda and Chris, you know, go do it. That's fine.
When
he was
did you
so
do that?
supportive. Beg your pardon?
When did you do that, Kay? What years?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Well, in the early parts of 2000, our last trip was down into Virginia, and that's been, I don't know, that's been 10 years ago. But we had several trips out there. We flew to, well, of course, I flew to Tucson and, the Air Race Classics, Santa Fe, and all of those. I've lived a charmed life. I really have.
Okay, so Air Race Classics. Why don't you talk about your involvement in those? Were you ever in the Powder Puff Derbies?
No, the Powder Puff was, they changed the name of the Powder Puff to the Air Race Classic. They felt that that was more professional, Powder Puff kind of sounded like womanish or something like that. Even though the Air Race Classic was still confined to women, but it sounded more professional, I guess.
Can you tell us, how did the name Powder Puff Derby come about? Do you know that story?
Well, yeah, I think it was because it was so unique for women to fly these air races of 2,300 nautical miles that I think some probably man mentioned, or a news person said, well, a powder puff. Because in those
Who was
days,
the comedian that was out from the West that he never met a man, or never met someone who was a stranger? That was the guy who coined the phrase, I think, but I could be wrong.
well, that could be very well be. I never researched that.
But it was
Yeah.
kind of a derogatory term.
It
And
is,
so Air Race
but
Classic kind of made it professional, like you said.
right, it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek type.
Mhm.
You're right. It was a kind of well, it was. You could see that he was sneering when he said it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So talk about your favorite flights.
Oh, there was so many of them. I loved the flight to Tucson. Of course, my husband was with me, and also my son's fiance, for his first wife. They were not married at the time. She was in medical school, and she had just finished, and they were working on their wedding and everything. But it was the trip out there. I loved that. And I think I may have told you this one other time. One of the trips well, we were heading to Del Rio, Texas, I think, because that's where my son was at Laughlin Air Force Base down there. And we were heading down there, and a friend of mine asked if she could go along, and I would stop at Waco, and she would get off there and get a bus to see her daughter in Houston. And we were, I think, we were Illinois or heading down toward Kentucky, and I was on top of a cloud, a solid cloud layer, and we were just skimming along the top of those clouds, and it was you could forever these white clouds, the puffy clouds. And I thought, oh, this is such a neat. In those days, you didn't have iPhones to take pictures and so forth. And I looked around, and both my husband and my friend were sound asleep.
Oh.
Aw.
Something, because they were both nervous flyers, especially my husband, I thought, I'm not going to wake him up because, but that was so neat to see, just skimming right on the top of those white clouds. And it seemed like they went on forever. That was one of my favorite flights. But I've had so many, just so many flights. So anyway, I think I said that 2 or 3 times, didn't I?
That's good though. That means you enjoy what you do. It's not out of obligation.
Right.
So what would you recommend to someone expressing an interest in pursuing their private pilot certificate or an aviation career?
Well, I would say, go for it. It's not an easy thing to do to get a career. When you think about it, to get an ATP, to be able to be qualified for to go for the airlines or to be a corporate pilot and so forth, in this day and age, it's the same as a college education, to build up those hours and the cost of it. But go for it. Don't let circumstances stop you or sway you in another way. If you really want to do it, do it.
Okay. I like it.
And you have got to talk about what you wore back in your early days of flying. When you went flying, what was your outfit?
Well, of course, mostly slacks and so forth, or jeans or something like that. But there have been occasions when I've had to dress in high heels. Yeah, I remember. Never. Well, of course, this is another story, but that was about a balloon ride I took, but that's another story. You wouldn't be interested in that.
Tell about, didn't the women back in the 50s wear matching gloves and bags and shoes and hat?
Yeah, no, that was not me because I was not a fashionista, for by any means. I could dress up because we had to go a lot of social activities and so forth. But yeah, there were some people, especially on those Aries Classics, those gals dressed to the nines, but not me. You know, I was all for comfort and flying.
That'd be
And
more my
still,
style. Yes.
right,
I agree with you.
comfort.
So, what, if any, is your favorite like fly-in or aviation event?
Well, of course, Oshkosh, that's the ultimate as far as that's concerned. And going to 99's meetings. I had loved to do that. As a matter of fact, that was the reason why I joined All Ohio and maintained my membership there because the ultimate goal was to fly.
Mhm.
Meetings didn't interest me. As a matter of fact, sometimes in the earlier days, I wasn't in any hurry to get to the meeting. I just wanted to fly because I was not interested in the minutes or the treasurer's report or all those things. But so I don't know whether that's a valid answer, but I guess I got to be honest.
So, did you have any other challenges that you faced as a female pilot?
Um, Not even in the beginning. The only other thing was in the old days with flight service. I don't know. I don't know whether they just didn't approve in those earlier days of talking to women because they had a tendency to kind of fluff you off. For instance, like you say, unless you said you want an instrument flight, they'd kind of say, I don't think you ought to go because, the weather was indifferent at your destination and so forth. But those were the old days. Now you don't have to deal with that.
True, very true. So, what words of wisdom would you like to share with present and future female pilots?
Keep your airspeed up. Above all things, don't worry about communication or anything. If you're in a tight spot, fly your airplane. Don't worry about talking to anybody, but just fly your airplane and read as much as you can. Take flying magazines. Read about other people's experience and connect with other women to talk to them. Find somebody that is a mentor that has had a lot of experience and can share with you what they have learned. I found that.
Who was your mentor? Who were the women that were important to you in those early years?
Well, Joan Mace,
Mm-hmm.
although she was busy and she didn't get to an awfully lot of things. Well, I'll tell you, my mentor was really my son because he, his whole life was aviation. His whole life, it still is. And so he pretty much was my mentor. So,
That's an awesome relationship.
But when I joined the 99s, there were a lot of women there that had lots of experience and had flown powder puffs and angel derbies. there was another race that was an Angel Derby. Those were races that went internationally, in other words, to Mexico or Canada and so forth. There was a gal by the name of Mary Ann let's see, shoot, what was her last name? She was a WASP that belonged to our chapter. And I loved talking to her because she flew the Angel Derbies and so forth. And she had an Arrow, which is, an airplane that I would have liked to do. But she was such an inspiration because she flew that B-26, which maybe I've talked to you about before, that was such a difficult airplane to fly. It had a short wing, and a lot of those, there was an air base down around Tampa. They always said, one a day in Tampa Bay. Their problem was that they would jink the rudders, and you can't do that with a short wing airplane because they were men and, they had flown other airplanes. Whereas Mary Jane, she was a tiny little thing, and she would finesse those rudders. So she was really adept at flying the B-25. But she was a mentor too. Unfortunately, she left for Scioto chapter, and I didn't have a chance to, follow up on her. But she's passed now, and her uniform now is at the, what's that aviation museum in Columbus? Anyhow, her WASP uniform is there.
Who was the most famous aviatrix that you remember, you knew?
Oh, well, probably Joan Mace is probably as famous as anyone that I've ever known.
And
there
for
were a
those who
lot-
don't know, Joan Mace was the first head of an aviation department
Right.
that was a woman, and it was at Ohio University.
Right, that's right. Plus, she was well known in the aviation community all over the United States. When I went to her memorial service, there was all kinds of people from all over that came to that because of her notoriety in aviation. And so anyway, we had a gem, and I don't think we all appreciated her as much as we probably should have. But well, one of the things that I was so proud of was that she always, when we would come to meetings after she retired, she always wanted to fly with me. So I felt pretty, I was honored that the fact that she, had enough confidence in my flying.
Well, that feeling, that wanting to make sure that we record this is part of why we're doing this project.
Right.
Your stories, things that people have handled and done over the years, we hope are going to be, they're going to be a motivator for others. All right, well, I thank you for being with us tonight. We're going to end this, and then we appreciate your spending your time with us this evening, and we hope that you all who are watching have gotten a lot out of this, and that you will have more of a sense of Kay and her adventures in aviation. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. It was a privilege.
Okay, good night.